He was the last Beatle to try LSD, and he didn't even want to. But when Paul McCartney finally gave in to the pressure, it didn't just change his mind, it changed his music, his perspective on the world, and most profoundly, his relationship with John Lennon. What really happened the night McCartney first took LSD? Paul McCartney never quite fit the image of the wild rock star consumed by drugs. While the Beatles dabbled in their fair share of substances, their drug use was often seen as more experimental than excessive. Less about addiction, more about unlocking new creative frontiers. And none of those substances had a bigger impact on their evolution than LSD. Interestingly, Paul was the last one to join the acid revolution. Unlike John Lennon and George Harrison, who had already plunged into the psychedelic realm, Paul initially stuck to more familiar territory, alcohol and marijuana. But as 1965 drew to a close, the social dynamic within the Beatles began to shift, and with it, Paul's resistance began to crumble. He later admitted that it wasn't just curiosity that drove him to try LSD. It was pressure, not just from friends, but from the very band that defined his life. He once reflected that while he was more comfortable with weed or a drink, the growing tension from his bandmates made it hard to hold out. When everyone around you is doing it, it's not just peer pressure, it's fear pressure, Paul explained. Within the band, that pressure was amplified. It became less about personal choice and more about proving you were still part of the group. Eventually, one night, he gave in and told them, "All right, let's do it." And that night changed everything. Though he entered the experience with hesitation, Paul quickly found himself captivated by LSD. He would later describe the drug as something that expanded his mind and altered his view of the world. He believed LSD tapped into dormant parts of human potential and once even imagined what could happen if world leaders embraced it. McCartney envisioned a world without war or hunger if people, especially politicians, could see what he saw. "We only use a small fraction of our brains," he once remarked, implying that LSD might unlock a higher level of understanding, empathy, and peace. But the most profound effect, he claimed, wasn't political or philosophical, it was personal. That first acid trip deepened his connection with John Lennon in a way he'd never experienced before. McCartney described a moment of intense eye contact between them, something so powerful and surreal that it felt as though their identities merged. Looking into John's eyes, Paul said, he could see himself, and neither of them dared look away. "It was wild," he remembered, like dissolving into each other. This moment of emotional vulnerability and psychedelic bonding seemed to transform their creative relationship. That newfound connection would soon echo through their music as the Beatles transitioned into their now iconic psychedelic era. Even if McCartney had never spoken about that night, fans could trace its impact through the band's sound. By the mid-1960s, the Beatles had shed their clean-cut image and embraced a more experimental style. Albums like Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band captured their deep dive into psychedelia, a shift many credit with redefining modern music. For McCartney, what began as reluctant experimentation blossomed into creative liberation. His first trip on LSD didn't just alter his outlook, it brought him closer to Lennon and pushed the Beatles into a bold new era of music, meaning, and mind-expanding exploration.